Welcome to episode 37 of the Camera Shake podcast, the podcast where we talk about anything and everything to do with photography, videography, making photos, making videos, filmmaking, and anything that's got anything to do with any of that. So before we get into it, let me just say, if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, it'd be really super awesome if you could head over to YouTube and just hit the subscribe button, because that would be great. Likewise, if you're on Apple Podcast, you could do us a massive favor and just scroll down and write us a little review, hit the star rating, because that way we can make sure that our podcast actually gets found in the great sea of podcasts that there is. So without further ado, let me introduce today's guest. Today we have something really special for you, or someone really special to you. Please welcome Krys Alex to the show today. Krys, how are you? You okay?
I'm doing good. Yeah, it's a little cold here, but we're warming up as the day goes, but I'm doing good.
Cool. So when you say cold, because you're based in Atlanta, when you say cold, how cold is it actually?
For me, 30 degrees is cold. I'm from Jamaica, so I don't like anything below 50. Yeah.
Great.
You're going to have to do the conversion for me here, because you know both, right?
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have to think about that. 30 degrees Fahrenheit, is that about 10 degrees centigrade or something like that?
Times 20 plus 50 plus what?
Complicated.
I can't do it.
For it. It is cold, though. It is cold.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Krys, you are a portrait photographer and editorial and documentary photographer and filmmaker. And you've got something that I really liked on your website. It says, "Always shining light on my culture," which is such a beautiful little kind of phrase on there. So how would you describe yourself as a photographer?
So I would say I love capturing the vulnerability in people, and I love bringing back my culture in whatever I do. I think a lot of times when I'm taking photographs, I like to use color because that lifts our spirit. Based in my culture, that is complementary on our skin too. So those are the things I like to stick with when I say always shining light on my culture. I just try to make that whole thing a full circle when it comes to my photography.
Yeah, because looking at your website and your Instagram, it's a very sort of technically you would probably call it like a photojournalistic kind of style.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I would really call it like photographic storytelling, because that's really the kind of impression that I get when I look at that.
Right. Yeah. I'm not doing a lot of direction. I'm really a fly on the wall, capturing what's really there. And I just love doing that because it's just more authentic for me. And I've always been using natural light in my photography. So I'm not, accustomed to doing a lot of setup. I do that with my commercial and editorial stuff, but I love just capturing what's really in front of me and using natural light a lot.
Mm. Is that how you started in photography originally, or?
Yeah, that's how I started. I really started just using my DSLR with my Canon and my 50 millimeter, and I literally was just roaming around the street and just taking photos of whatever I saw. I think it was a St. Patrick parade that really lit me up. I was just so amazed by walking around and capturing people's emotions and, everything that had to do with the parade, getting all that was just how it all came in reality for me. This is what I want to do.
So is that something you just fell into, or did you go to university to study photography, or how did you first get started?
Yeah, so I started when I was in Jamaica. Growing up in high school, I was looking at a lot of National Geographic magazines.
Yeah.
So looking at that, I was like, wow, this is amazing, looking at what's going on in the world and what I saw in my own country. So that kind of sparked the flame for me. But what happened was I had a lot of friends who loved me taking photos of them. So I started taking photos of my friends and my family. So that kind of built up. But when I moved to Atlanta for college, I really wanted to be a doctor, a psychologist.
Mhm.
And then once I started to realize how much more school I had to go into to do that, I was like, oh no, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But actually, my partner helped me realize that photography could be a career choice. Because growing up, where I'm from, they push you to be a doctor, a lawyer, that kind of thing. They don't want you to be in that kind of artistic community where you can have a career there. So I took a photography class in college, and that was when it was like, okay, I could really do this.
How did your friends and family react when you decided that I'm going to go for photography as my career rather than, say a doctor?
Yeah, it was a little surprising for them, but once they saw that I had a good eye and I really enjoyed it, they didn't mind the decision I made to change. I mean, even though I went to college for psychology and my MBA, it was like, well, why would you be stuck in something you don't want to do for the rest of your life?
Yeah, I did that. As I left school, I went into corporate world immediately and did that for 15 years until I hated it so much that I had to leave and just do something creative. And that's what I've been doing ever since. And I'll never look back. I'm such a happier person now.
For me,
I'm sure you had experience from what you did with what you do now. We take something from everything we do.
Absolutely. I don't regret it for a second. I wouldn't be able to do what I do now had I not gone through what I've been through there. But I'm definitely happier doing something that I enjoy.
Yeah.
For me, it was the other way around because I always wanted to study music when I was a kid and I was a teenager. And then, of course, once you get to the point where you're just about to to get into college and stuff, it's funny how family and friends who've always supported you, through your teenage years, like being a musician, all of a sudden they go like, yeah, okay, that's all good, but do you want to study something proper, first? And you go,
right.
But that is art is proper, it's like, that's a proper job. I'm being a musician,
Yeah.
So it's I can see what that feels like when you have to kind of fight against that a little bit.
Yeah.
So what do you do now? Is photography your full-time gig?
So yeah, it is my full-time gig. I do have a part-time job too, because, with the pandemic happening, I have to make things neat. But I do a lot of work for a local magazine in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. So I'm doing that. And then here and there, I get gigs for ad campaigns and stories for different centers like the King Center. And right now we have like a lot of voting activism going on. So I've been doing stuff for that. So those little things have been building up my time, but I really want to dig into, doing more publications. But with the pandemic happening, it's hard to get really into it.
So how's the whole pandemic even affected you in Atlanta specifically? Because it's like, so what we see over here in Europe, right, is Atlanta's been on the news a lot. Because it's been a lot of stuff that's been happening. Of course, initially with things like protests, like Black Lives Matters protests, and then of course, very recently with the whole the whole presidential election, Georgia thing, and all that sort of stuff. So, and whenever it always feels to me like when I watch the news or something, I always wonder it's either the pandemic isn't happening there or nobody pays any attention to it. So what's how has the pandemic affected you and your photography over the last, almost like a year, 10 months? Yeah.
Yeah, it's been like a year. It really slowed down for me because a lot of things that I were doing had a lot of gatherings, had a lot of people together, especially with events. So because events aren't happening, a lot of photography gigs aren't really there. There's things that people do like, all right, well, we'll have a gig and everyone get tested and everyone wear a mask until you're in front of the camera. And that's been going well, but I still think that's a little risky. So that's why I haven't been able to really dive into a lot of gigs because of, the pandemic. So it really slowed down for me. I think I started off at maybe at least 6-7 gigs a month. And now it's kind of down to 2-3, if that.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had a very similar experience over here because the UK went in like around March time, we went into total national lockdown, and it was basically everything was shut. Schools were shut, businesses were shut, everything was shut, and it basically, photography wise, for me, typically what I do is corporate photography. There was no corporate stuff happening, so it was like, it went down to zero like within a day. Actually, it was pretty much a day or phone calls, and that was it. And that's really ultimately, why we started this podcast in the first place.
Yeah,
was because we didn't have anything better to do. Actually, to be honest,
yeah, that's how I kind of started with dabbling into film, because I had the time. So I was playing with my gimbal over there, learning different techniques, learning slow-mo. So the pandemic was like a gift and a curse, like it allowed us to dive into stuff that we wanted to learn and have fun with, but it did, of course, money, that whole part is needed, but the time to like look at your work and look at what you love to do and practice new things, that was like the positive of it.
Yeah, that was definitely true for us too. For us, I think it was important to talk to other people who were in the same boat. Because it's very, we kind of felt that, it's very easy when you sit at home and you start to get a little bit depressed about the fact that your life's just falling apart, and you don't really, it's unless you start talking to other people who experience the same thing, you may not realize that you're not the only person who's feeling like this, and then when, you start talking to other people and you realize, actually, hang on a minute, we're all in the same boat here, and we're all feeling like this. And so maybe together we can like talk about things and find solutions and get some ideas and make things happen. And it was, so how are you finding the gimbal, by the way? I saw a picture of you with the Ronin.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I just need to learn like how to save certain settings. So like I know if I want this effect, then I can go to that button. So I want to get good at that and really just practice. I got to go out there and practice. I think when you're afraid to let go of being a kid and just like play around with things, you start to realize that's when the magic happens. You just really start something fun and you get better at it once you keep doing it. So that's kind of like my goal this year, to keep playing around and don't be afraid to make a mistake.
It's heavy, isn't it? That gimbal.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Oh, I've got the Ronin S, and it's just, I have a bad back at times as well. It's like, oh my God. Right. Sorry, that's 1 10-second shot. I'm just going to have a 10-minute break.
Well, so we went out to a local forest a few days ago, really, just to film some stuff and just have some fun. We brought a gimbal, and Nick's actually very good at operating it, and I'm not. So, but for some of the scenes, I had to basically shoot him with a gimbal. I found that that's really tricky, man.
It's really tricky, particularly if it's not 100% set up correctly.
Yeah.
If it's off by even just a little bit, you can forget having a straight shot. And mine, does yours waver a little bit as well? Does it start going kind of off?
Yeah, especially if you have a big lens on it. Like if I have my 16 or 35 millimeter lens on it, it's so heavy and hard to balance. So I typically try to keep my 50 on it so that I can handle it with a lighter lens. And then sometimes I put a monopod on it so I can lean it on my stomach. That way it's not so much on my arms.
It's a good idea.
That's a cracking tip. Pro tip right there. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gonna get
my mentor taught me how to do that. Yeah.
A few years ago, I did a shoot, and I had to get a fly cam. Do you remember those? They're like, it's like a stick with like a balance thing. You get a camera on top, and it's like weights on the bottom, sort of like T-shaped, and it's basically an old-fashioned Steadicam. But the thing about it is that because you've got the camera and the lens and the microphone, whatever, on top, you've got to balance it with the same amount of weight at the bottom. So the whole thing gets incredibly heavy. Yeah. And it's sort of, you can only hold it. You hold it with one hand
as well, isn't it? Yeah.
Because you're turning the camera with your other hand. So all the weight is on like one hand. It's incredible. It was like a 20-hour shoot or something. It was killing.
Yeah. Now, I mean, we can get away with using our phone, really, and just getting a small handheld because our phones are so professional now, the cameras.
Yeah. Cool. So are you planning on getting more into filmmaking?
Yeah, I want to dive into it more. A lot of inspiration comes from just watching movies. I love watching movies. So that like pushes me to like, oh, I can try that angle. I can do that. Watching YouTube, listening to podcasts, learning from other people. So I just got to do it. I think I've done my due diligence in watching and learning. Now it's just like time to stop being afraid and just try.
Yeah. Because you just get it. I think you just got to get doing it. That's the most important.
Yeah, that's how I learned with shooting in manual. Like I just kept doing it and doing it. I didn't want to learn any other mode, but just doing manual. And once I started doing it more and more, I got better at it. And then that's it. You know, once you keep doing something, then you maximize how to learn your camera and all that. And that's what I want to do with the gimbal.
Do you sometimes feel it? Like, do you sometimes go back and look at like images from like some years ago when you first sort of started, and you look at them and you go, "Ooh, oh no, no,
what was I doing?
That's terrible."
That was yesterday, actually. I was looking through my my beginning post on Instagram, and I was like, "Why was my light like this? Why did I pose this person this way?"
Yeah,
it was awful back in the day, but I mean, it taught me something, and now I know like how to even show someone or help someone out. And I kind of like doing that too, teaching the very basics of photography, you know, just from what mistakes I made. So now I just like, oh, well, now I know what to do. It's fun now.
Yeah. We like through doing these podcasts and like through talking to lots of different people. I think this, you know, in every episode, every time we speak to a different photographer from a totally unrelated genre, there's always something that we pick up from that. And sometimes it's a technique, you know, it's a technical thing, you know, or sometimes it's just like an idea or, you know, some kind of ideological thing where you kind of think, oh yeah, I never thought about this, you know, doing it this way or doing it, you know, or using that lens or like, you know, we were just talking about a lot of sort of events that have been happening in Atlanta. Is that it seems like from looking at your portfolio, that's really something that you really get involved with a lot, is documenting these kind of events.
Yeah.
Because do you feel like you're really witnessing history being in the making?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so surreal when I finish shooting something. I sit down, I realize, wow, like this is a part of history. This is a big deal. Shooting the protests in Atlanta in June. You know, when you're in it, and you're just trying to get great photos, and you're thinking about light and thinking about capturing people and getting the right angle. And then later on, you're sitting down looking at your images like, wow, no, this is real. This is an emotion that people experience. This is a time where people are hurting. You know what I mean? The reality and the big picture of it hits you later once you look at your photos. But during it, you're just trying to get a good photo. You're just trying to capture what's really there in a great way. And then it hits you that this actually matters. This is actually could be in a book, could be in a magazine, could be published. Yeah. And I love using photography as a voice to, you know, say what's going on and be accountable for my part in showing people what's going on in the world.
Mm. It's incredibly, like photographs can be incredibly powerful when it comes to that. You know, there's a lot of, obviously there are a lot of photographs now that are really, you know, historic photographs of particular things like, you know, that photograph in, was it Merming Square in China? I can never remember the actual name of that. Where you have like one protester stopping a tank, essentially.
Oh,
you know, and it's I know from reading about this at the time, I know that that photograph was basically just one of a whole barrage of photographs that were taken. It was just that one shot that just became so, you know, powerful and you know, took on this historic importance, you know. And I think with everything that's been going on in your city, you know, there are a lot of photographs that I look at on your website, for example, where I'm thinking like, wow, like in 10 years time, we're going to be looking back at those, and it's like, you know, this there's just so much more behind that.
Right, right.
So do you just basically decide that when you know that there's for instance a protest march happening, do you just grab your gear and go and shoot, or is there usually are you commissioned to do that, or do you shoot for a magazine when you do that kind of thing? Or?
Sometimes I'm commissioned, like the King Center, which is owned by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter, Bernice King.
Right.
Sometimes I'm commissioned to do that. But with the protest, that was just based off what I wanted to do. So in my head, I was like, okay, I want to go out there. I want to capture what's going on. And I want to make sure I can tell a story with it. So I'm going to get wide angles. I'm going to get tight angles. I'm going to get people's emotions. I'm going to get, details. I kind of think of it like a movie. Like when you watch a movie, you see the opening scene of the entire location first, and then you see a medium shot of a few people together, and then a tight shot maybe of a sign or someone holding something. So I kind of go into shoots like that with that in my mind, with that kind of game plan.
I think that's a really good bit of advice, actually, for those listeners who may be relatively new to photography. When it comes to shooting a large crowd like this, is to really think along those lines of wide shots where you can set the scene and you can basically tell the story of what's actually happening, and then medium shots and tighter shots where you can go into the detail and you can maybe showcase like emotion in people's faces,
right,
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you kind of create that context with the wider shots, and then you go in to fill in the detail.
Yeah, exactly. I learned that a lot from, like I said, movies, but even other photojournalists that I know that work for the newspaper and has their photos published in the New York Times. They've always said to me, you got to tell a story with these different kind of components, and that will allow your viewer to be there, like to see the photos and just feel like they were there because they had all these different angles and, aspects of the scene. They could kind of tell what happened and they could feel the same emotion that you capture.
Do you ever find or receive conflicts from people you're photographing at events like that?
Yeah, sometimes people are like, no, I don't want my photo taken. And sometimes I'll show them the photo and say, okay, I just wanted to show you what you look like. This is a great photo. And if they're unhappy, then I just show them that I deleted it, just so, because I have to respect someone's privacy. And sometimes I don't want to be photographed. So I totally understand if someone doesn't want to have their photo taken. But for the most part, I don't have too many people saying no. Luckily, I think it has to do with my gender. Being a woman kind of makes someone feel less, it's not aggressive for some reason. I think someone's more comfortable with a female approaching them. I guess it's less, I don't know, something about that makes somebody feel more comfortable. And I realize that once I see men approaching people, they get a different reaction than a female.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more intimidating, I think.
Yeah, I think that's what it has to do with.
So, have you ever run into any issues with security or police or anything like that when you were at these events?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. For the most part, not really. Oh, I think what happens is once I realize there's a security guard walking around, I kind of wait for him to go away. And then I come back to the scene to grab what I want to grab, just so I avoid any kind of confrontation with, being on the premise of anything. But usually everything is public that I shoot. So unless I would do drone, and I haven't done drone before, but I know that gets tricky. That's when you have to kind of realize where you're allowed to shoot with drones.
Yeah, which in the UK is pretty much nowhere.
Yeah.
Is that how it's there? Wow.
Yeah, we have our drone laws are very they're very strict. It's a little bit like Canada. It's probably even stricter than Canada. But we've had, I don't know if you may have seen this in the news a couple of years ago. We had a guy who was basically forcing planes to land or prevented planes from taking off at Heathrow Airport.
Wow.
Because he was flying a drone over the airport sort of thing. And there was like, I don't know, there was like tons of police and the military got involved and they couldn't find them and all that kind of jazz. And it went on for...
Was it part of a protest, so to speak? It was in connection to...
I can't remember, but it was at a time when London was on high alert for terrorist attacks anyway.
Yeah.
And so, it was, and it went on for like a relatively long time. It went for like a whole day or something.
Yeah. They shut the whole airport down for a day. Imagine Heathrow down for a day.
I mean, oh my God, that's crazy.
Biggest airport in the world.
Yeah. And so as a consequence, they immediately tightened up the drone laws, which were pretty tight before that, but now it's like...
It's almost pointless owning one.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you can, it's tricky. So you can't really, I mean, in cities, you can't really fly at all, basically, which is kind of annoying.
Yeah. That's what made drone photography intimidating for me. The rules, and then just the risk of something happening to the drone. That's why I've never really dived into it.
Yeah, the flying of it is actually super fun. I mean, I bought a drone a couple of years ago for a particular job. And the thing is here, if you fly a drone commercially, you have to have a commercial drone license, sort of a thing. And but at the time, I wasn't actually piloting the drone, so I bought the drone and I since own it. But I wasn't piloting it for this particular job. But I kind of thought it'd be a good idea to buy one anyway because it seemed like a lot of fun. Yeah. And now really just to take it out to we have like a big park where you're allowed to fly and fly there.
The pain is that I could go with you to that park where you can fly it, yet I wouldn't be allowed to fly it.
Yeah. Right, because you don't have the commercial license. Yeah, that sucks.
So it's
Never mind. Yeah. Never mind.
So all we can do is watch YouTube videos of drone shots and
right.
It's a bit annoying here.
I don't think people really want to see Rickman's worth in a slow.
No, well, there's that. But there was a funny thing that we came across in the middle of lockdown, and because the thing was during the height of lockdown, we were looking for interesting stories of people doing interesting creative things with photography. In a time when you had to work from home or couldn't do anything. And so there was a guy in, I believe it was either Bulgaria or Romania or something like that. And he was doing, he came up with this idea of doing portraits of people that live in high-rise buildings with his drone. So he would literally call them up and basically say dress up in fancy dress or something. And they lived let's say on the 16th floor of some high-rise building. And he basically fly his drone in front of their window and then take portrait pictures. Yeah, it was hilarious.
Mad.
I love that. Really That's so cool. It kind of reminds me of, I think it was a New York photographer where he asked everyone to get on the top of their buildings and take portraits of that. And he uses 70-200 and he would be across from them and take photos of them across where he was. And then there was a lot of porch portraits too. It was like a porch thing where anyone that was on their porch would come by and do. So I saw a lot of those creative series happening, which was so inspiring too.
Yeah. How restricted were you in the middle of the kind of sort of pandemic thing? Did you have a lockdown in Georgia? Or?
Yeah, we had a little lockdown. It should have been longer, but the lockdown was probably until from March to June. That's when we weren't allowed to, everything was shut down besides the grocery store and first responders and all that. But after that, everything was pretty much open and still is. So the restriction has completely gone down. But our numbers are going up, and I hope they change their minds and they lock us down again because it should happen.
Yeah. We're experiencing the same thing. Our numbers are going up. They're going through the roof actually at the moment.
Higher than when they were at the start, right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
All our hospitals are full. Our healthcare system is it's terrible. It really is.
Yeah, and then you go outside and you see people not wearing masks, and you go, what is going on?
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah.
I mean, just I mentioned at the beginning, there's a whole bunch of interesting things happening. Obviously, in Georgia, you've got the Senate runoff elections happening as well. So that's the next.
Yeah, that's happening. I think the 5th Tuesday is the last day to vote. So I don't know if you saw that I took some photographs of the running candidate, Reverend Warnock, but he's up for election now, and I'm hoping that he wins and John Ossoff wins. So it was cool to be to meet him and to hear about his views and what he can do to change around certain things in our country. So that was one of my favorite shoots for the year. Yeah.
Because that election can have a massive impact on what's happening in the Senate and how much influence the Democrats will actually have in the Senate. So
exactly.
There's a lot riding on
happens. We'll see what happens on January 20th with the president. It's going to be crazy.
Yeah. We're following that over here, with great trepidation. I think.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. Yeah.
It's for these things. You would, if somebody like this is the thing that really freaks me out is like if like 3 years ago anybody had told like if anybody had said first of all oh there's going to be like a worldwide pandemic that's going to shut everything down, it's going to be total disaster, blah blah, and we're going to be like trying to find a vaccine like crazy, and then people had told me about like what is happening in the US in terms of government and the president and everything, like you would have thought that was a bad movie. That's like a B movie.
Yes.
Total fantasy.
Craziness. And it's just like bad news after bad news after bad news. You would really think it's like, are we really, is this really happening?
Yeah.
From the pandemic to social justice to, all of that happening all in 1 year. It's insane. It's really insane.
Yeah. It's like 2020 for me is like a pretty much a write-off. Yeah. No, anyway.
Yeah, right. I don't even want to talk about 2020 more. Like I saw a lot of people, a lot of artists in the community posting their reviews, and I'm just like, let's move forward. In my opinion, like let's just make this year, a better year. Let's do the right thing. I don't even want to look back at it too much.
Yeah. I mean, talking about artists, both Nick and me our background is in music. So so we came, we have had a full-time career in music, really, and we came to photography or videography, as in Nick's case, through that. Like I initially started shooting bands, and I was it was like a natural progression for me because I used to be on stage a lot, and then I just stepped off the stage and started photographing my friends playing on stage,
right.
And so seeing a lot of my friends really suffer really badly through the pandemic, with especially for musicians, but generally for artists across the board. When all of your livelihoods are being taken away through no fault of your own, or actually through no fault of nobody's fault, really. It's not even the government's fault in many cases, because there are no earning opportunities there anymore. Teaching, you can't teach face to face anymore. You can't play gigs, you can't play shows. Theaters are shut down. So it's a really dreadful time for a lot of artists, and then of course, and we'll get to that in a second. And then in the UK in particular, it was made even worse because although the government put help in place for lots of different professions and lots of different parts of the economy and different businesses and different types of businesses, the arts and music were really left behind, and that was really tough to see, and it's really tough to kind of to listen to and to read on Facebook and on social media in general. Lots of people that we knew, or that we know, and to read that kind of post and to see how tough things were getting for them was really terrible. And then to hear our there was at one point there was an interview with our chancellor over here. So the chancellor in the UK is basically the guy. What would be the equivalent in the US, like the Treasury Secretary or something like that, or Finance Secretary or something like that? The guy with his finger on the purse, essentially.
Right.
There was an interview where it was said that musicians should, or artists should, like retrain.
Yeah, reskill.
Reskill, and you kind of go, it's incredible. I mean, there were people like sitting there hoping for help, and then you get that thrown in your face. That was just like, that was the
hurtful.
That was the final straw. And then, of course, what happened next was something that made matters even worse. And that is something where I actually came across your photograph for the first time. Of course, and there was a government campaign over here in the UK called Rethink Reskill Reboot, something like that. And it was one of your photographs that had been used in an advertising campaign that basically said, you're well, essentially he said.
So it's, how I read it when they said that was, your career is over. Go and do something else.
Yeah.
That's how I took it as a creative.
Exactly.
And that's how every creative I know took that as well. We don't care about what you actually do and what you enjoy and what your career has been for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Yeah. Go do something else.
So to put some context to that, for those listeners who may not be necessarily familiar with it, so there was a government advertising campaign. It was a photograph of a ballerina, and it said something along the lines of like, "This is Fatima. Her career is in cyber, but she doesn't know it yet."
Yeah.
Right. And the implication was that, if you're a ballerina or if you're an artist, your career is like worthless, and what you should really be thinking about is retraining and do something in IT. Because these apparently are the skills that we need as an economy or something like that. And of course that really caused massive uproar in the artist community, or in the arts in general.
It caused more uproar than the lack of help that the government were giving us to begin with as creative.
Yeah. And so, and what kind of, to me made the whole thing even worse, if it can get even worse, was the fact that, when I found out that actually the whole thing, that whole photograph was just, the whole campaign was just so totally misleading.
Yeah.
Because the UK government actually used one of your photos for this campaign without your knowledge.
Yeah.
How, like, just take us through that. Like, how did you find out about that?
Yeah, the whole story is still crazy to me. Like I said in the video, I'm not sure if you guys saw it. I kind of had a small response into it, but I just woke up I think it was like October 12th or something like that. It was a Monday, and I just had a flood of emails and calls about it, and I had no idea. So I started reading more about what was going on, and it was just a whirlwind after that, learning about the campaign, seeing the photo, seeing everyone's comment and everyone's opinion. It was crazy. It really was crazy. I was in a whole nother world. I couldn't believe it.
Like, how did that initially make you feel?
Oh, I was hurt. I really was like speechless at the beginning. Like I couldn't even believe it was happening. And I was just thinking about, Desiree the dancer. And I was just like, wow, like this is her face, herself on this photograph. So I just was thinking about her. And then, I can't, of course we're still going through this whole case, but I had to get legal counsel. So I'm still in the process of that. So that's why it's so hard to like talk in detail about it. But it was hard to take the whole thing happening. And then in another country too, not even where I am. So that was just insane. And I had a friend that I went to school with in Jamaica, and she lives there now. And she and I were messaging, and she was just like, yeah, this is big here. And I just was like, wow, I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't.
Do you think it might have been slightly easier to take had it not been for a campaign like the campaign it was for? So had it been for something completely unrelated to the arts, do you think it would have been slightly easier to handle?
That's a good question. I don't know. I guess it depends on what it would be about.
Yeah.
If it was about something that I was for, that I supported, maybe I'd feel different. But I don't know. I think the big picture is, as an artist in the artistic community, we want our work to be credited. We want permission. We want, people to use it for the right thing. That's like the big goal. So, if it was for something else, maybe, but I don't know. It just depends on what the context is.
Because I think the context is really, that's an important thing. Because it's one thing realizing that like somebody's used your work for their purposes, without your knowledge. That's one thing. But then, of course, if it's something that you really don't agree with, then that makes the whole thing even harder. But then, of course, also to realize that something like that then goes totally viral across the whole internet, and like I don't even know how many memes I've seen it's just gone. It just went there's probably a week or so where it just went completely ballistic,
and it was exactly a week. Yeah, it was a week it was nonstop. It was from that Monday to the following Monday, nonstop. It really was.
Yeah, and it's the impact that it had. On one hand, of course, it had the whole campaign itself had a major impact. Like I said earlier, on a lot of artists and musicians. And a lot of friends of ours.
Yeah.
But the thing that was even that made the whole thing even worse was to sort of think that that's a government campaign, because no matter whether you're as a citizen of any country, I think no matter whether you're in agreement with the government or you're not, is you kind of expect higher standards from your government. That's just at the bottom of it. You don't expect when you find out that the person Fatima isn't really Fatima.
Yeah.
And it's like the whole thing is a lie. Like the whole thing, it's just like, wow. That was a real shocker. And of course, as a photographer, to find out that you as a photographer didn't know about this, and this is just it's probably the ultimate nightmare. Actually, I would probably call that.
Yeah, it's like a reality show. You don't even want to be in a reality show, but all eyes are on you. So it's insane. I live a private life. I'm just a photographer that loves doing what I do, and then for that to happen, it just took me back. But I learned from it, and I'm still going to create what I love to do, and root for the artistic community, and that's what I have to continue to do.
So I think there's always lessons to be learned from that. I think on lots of different levels. On a government level, it's like don't nick photos. It's as simple as that.
It's like that whole campaign was put together in a couple of hours one evening, the whole lot. And they go, right, what's the quickest and easiest way that I can put this together? And unfortunately, that's the wrong way.
The thing is, I think you just expect better of your government, of any in any commercial settings, of course, you'd expect higher standards when it comes to that, because there are many ways that you can, get hold of stock photography and or even commission photography. It's not like I couldn't have commissioned that shoot. I've personally have done commissions of that, not necessarily of that very nature, but similar kind of campaign related kind of photography. It's not unheard of. So it's just it's mind boggling.
Mm-hmm. Has the government there come back and are they supporting any artists funding wise? Has anything changed?
Does my face give it away?
I think that as a no.
There's been some investment into the arts. It's you can always we have something here called the Arts Council, which is basically it's a body that distributes money to the arts, and it's like whether it's music or drama or whatever it is, or dance, and so it's almost like allots different amounts of money to like venues, let's say, or theaters, or music schools. Good. Or something like that. Because a lot of artists work on a sort of gig economy kind of basis, there really hasn't been a lot of help for those. Venues had access to some funding, theaters or whatever. But really, the musician just working, one gig to the next gig.
Yeah.
There's been very little help for those guys. And or like, jobbing actors, for example, or, and that's been a massive problem, is that a lot, really this fundamentally in the arts in general, you have a vast crowd of people who work in the gig economy. Right. And without them, none of the arts would happen,
Right.
Like you wouldn't have any actors in the theater, you wouldn't have any extras in movies.
Exactly. Right.
You wouldn't have anybody playing in live music in the bar. Exactly. None of that would happen. And I think very often the way that it seemed was that, the government would like support kind of the big movers and shakers, but the people who were really responsible for making the kind of wheel turn or the wheels turn didn't really see a lot of that. That's that was quite distressing. And I've heard so many stories of people going into other alternative professions, because they had no choice. Because at the end of the day, you got to pay the rent somehow, or
Exactly.
or feed your kids or whatever. So, but it's like it's yet another example of how the arts are always they seem to be forgotten about,
last priority. Yeah, I think that's like that here. It's the last priority. They don't want to help with this because one, they probably don't even see it as a real career. They don't take it seriously either. That's kind of like how it is here too.
Yeah. So it's been very frustrating.
Yeah,
in that respect.
Really has.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about because I always think, there always, like I said earlier, there's always lessons to be learned from something like that. And I had one of my photos got stolen about 6 years ago. It wasn't by any means as dramatic as in your case. It was just I took a photo of me on a bike, and the company that made the bike nicked that photo and used it on their website, essentially. But then to make matters worse, they also attached a false name and location to it, because all of a sudden I was Ben from California, which I'm not. So,
right. Yeah.
And of course that was annoying. And the only thing I can think of is that they nicked that off of my website, because I know I posted that picture on my website and on Facebook, essentially. And of course, I mean, these things happen. In your case, the photo in question that was on, I believe. Just tell us how you think that the UK government may have gotten hold of that in the first place.
Well, it's a lot, honestly. I think what's hard to do now is to talk in detail about it, because I'm still involved in it. So it's still a whirlwind, essentially. But it's just something that I found out was just used the wrong way. You know what I mean? It was just used the wrong way. And now we are discussing what options we have. And, we're getting Desiree involved because it was her name, Fatima. So now it's like what you said. It's like, wow, this is completely turned around to something else that's not really real. So dealing with that is long and interesting and hard to handle. But I think we're coming out of it strong and realizing, what our goals are to handle this case. So now it's still going on. So it's hard to talk about it more.
Sure. Yeah. What would you say to what bit of advice would you give somebody who thinks about sharing their photographs? Because very often you hear you hear kind of different opinions when it comes to sharing photographs. Some people say like, oh well, photographs are there to be shared because otherwise they just live on your hard drive, and then they're no good to anybody. And other people are very protective about their work to the point where they may not share anything, or or something that would have like a massive watermark across it, something like that.
Right. And that tends to be ugly when you see big watermarks. I say, if you are an artist and you're professional, you start with, with the client contracts. Make sure your contract has what you want it to have. Make sure you allow what you want it to allow. Make sure you put it places where hey, if it's here, it can get taken. You have to be kind of aware of all possibilities. So my advice would just be aware of what's going to happen and what you write in the contract with your client, with the person you're shooting, with what it's going to be used for. Just kind of do your due diligence and maybe join a organization with a photography community so you can learn more from others. I think that's like the biggest benefit in joining the artistic community, learning from other people, learning from people who are older than you, who have more experience, and kind of, telling you what the right thing to do is.
Has that whole experience changed the way you do things, or the way you think about things? Or?
I wouldn't say so. I think I still love being free with my photography. I love sharing my work. I love, helping people learn more and inspiring people. So that hasn't changed. I still want to be, the core of who I am and bringing shining light to my culture. Like that's like the big goal. So I think that's never going to change.
Has it changed the way you think about like sharing images online, or?
No, I think I've done everything the same. I think I've done everything the same in terms of putting it on my website, Instagram. So that I don't think I'm going to change that, with my work.
You mentioned Desiree earlier. Desiree is of course Fatima. She was called Fatima on the original poster. How did that affect her? Because it's, as you said, it was her face on the photo.
I would let her tell that story. I wouldn't really want to, speak for her. Sure. But of course, it changed her life. It changed, opened her eyes to what this world is. So I know that, but I would love for her to, soon one day be able to tell everyone how she feels. Yeah. She gave a little bit of her history and her future, what she wants to do in the most recent video that Flip kind of organized. I'm not sure if you guys saw that with her and the choreographer, the owner of Vibes in Motion. So that was a great video to watch to kind of get just a feel of who she was and who she is and what she wants to do in the future. But I would love for her to tell like how it impacted her for herself. Yeah.
Maybe to move away slightly from the negative connotations of what's happened with your photo. The photo itself is a fantastic shot. It's a really great photo. Can you? And it was actually taken in 2017, if memory serves correctly. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that shoot itself? Because the shot is great. It's really good.
Yeah, it was just a beautiful day. I was enjoying, she's actually my cousin, so I've enjoyed all the kind of jobs that she gives me to help promote her business. So it was just another one of those shoots where I'm helping her and her business out, and we're photographing, her ballerinas, her dancers. And it literally was just that kind of day where, we want to make sure we hit an authentic feel for what we want to accomplish. And that's exactly what we did. We kind of stuck to our goal of let's just be real. Let's just be how we really would be in a regular dance session, and that's what we accomplished.
You do get that feeling that this is how I picture it in my own head if I was actually there. Even does that make sense? It's not like a snapshot. It is a really good quality photo, and if anybody out there doesn't remember what this photo looks like, go and check it out again because that's class.
Thank you. Yeah, it's like that's what I love. I think that's what kind of makes me different from what I see. It's you're just capturing the vulnerability of people, like them actually doing something, and you're not trying to direct too much. You're just capturing what's in front of you.
What are your plans for the future? Like where do you see yourself going next with your photography?
Yeah, I honestly really would love to open up a natural light studio in Jamaica, where I'm from. I would love to do that and continue capturing my culture, everyday lives of everyday people. I love doing that. So I want to continue a series of that and using my photographs as a voice to, put more awareness of what's going on around in our communities. So I think that's the plan for the next few years, just working on that and hopefully to be, published in a popular newspaper. I love the New York Times. So I think that's kind of like a nice goal that I have too for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, lofty goals as well. I like it. It's great.
I like the natural light studio thing because
you don't often hear that, do you?
No, it's like that reminds me of a thing. Like this is funny. I had I built an extension to my house about a year ago, actually, year and a half ago. And I had a skylight. We had a skylight put in because I kind of thought, I can use this as a little photo studio, like when I'm doing stuff from home. And I thought exactly the same thing. I'd be like, oh, great. Be a natural light and awesome. It's always cloudy here. It's always cloudy. The light's always crap.
But not only is it always cloudy, it's inconsistently cloudy as well.
God.
Right. You get patches of light. I know.
Yeah.
That's the tricky part with natural light. It really is.
Yeah.
It would be cool to have a combination of like an outside area, with ways you can manipulate light, and then also an indoor natural light studio with big windows. That would be ideal to have both, the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And I guess if you're doing that in Jamaica, that would be the weather's a little bit nicer than here, right?
A little more consistent, maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah, a little more
That's
consistent.
cool. Right. And the colors and the greenery, it's just beautiful to me. It makes me feel alive.
Yeah. So if you're considering moving back to Jamaica, how long have you been in Atlanta?
I've been in Atlanta since 2006.
Yeah.
I think I wouldn't completely move to Jamaica. I'd probably go back and forth. Yeah,
Okay.
I'd probably want to be in both places, and maybe a third place. I have family in Florida and Miami too. So, hitting all locations where family is, because that's most important to me, and, doing what I love to do would be great. That'd be ideal to go back and forth.
Amazing. Imagine being able to go back and forth between Atlanta, Miami, and Jamaica.
Yeah. My family only live in cold places.
Yeah.
I know, man. I don't like the cold at all. I don't, guys.
Yeah.
Don't come here.
Yeah.
The culture there is great, though. I do want to visit.
Oh, you have to visit. Have you ever been to the UK?
I haven't been to the UK. I've been to France when I was like around 9. So I don't have a great memory of it, but I've been there once.
Oh, you would love it. When everything's back to normal and you can actually travel again, that's well worth it. And if you do head over here, do look us up. We'll
for sure I will
go out on a shoot.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing that we've just sort of recently gotten into a little bit more is street photography. And London is just it's a great place for street photography. There's just so much to shoot. In fact, we a few weeks ago we decided to go on a little street photography trip. And originally we had planned to go into town. I mean, we're basically on the outskirts of London here.
Yeah.
And so we were planning on going to town. That was just when the COVID cases just went through the roof. Yeah. And we just thought, okay, well, let's not do that. And so we went to the coast instead. So we went to a place called Brighton, which is by the coast. And it was a really great day. Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, that was really good fun.
Funnily enough, it was cold.
Well, it was cold. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was a cracking day. But we went with the intent of actually when we arrived, decided let's gear this up and do black and white today.
Yes.
And just get your eye in a bit, because it's not something we typically do, right? And thought, well, let's practice that. Yeah, the shots are a little bit different, composition, the way the light and contrast works and whatnot. But it was fun to do that for a change.
It's
Did
definitely
you shoot, architecture, or were you shooting people?
Both.
Yeah, both.
Yeah,
maybe actually probably predominantly people, kind of a thing, sort of thing.
Yeah, 50-50 for me, I think it was in the end.
It was one of those things, where it's easy to kind of, when you really get used to controlling the environment all the time in the studio, with artificial light and everything else, it's very easy to, you really miss out on the spontaneity, and this sort of immediateness of photography sometimes. And you're really not really documenting anything either, because you're in a studio environment, you are responsible for every little thing. And that's great, of course, if you're shooting food, or if you're, shooting people in the studio and stuff. But it's very, very different. It's actually kind of the polar opposite of just documenting your environment in a really creative way, And so it was just a bit of a challenge. And I think, after, I don't even know how many months of actually being really restricted and not being able to go out very much and stuff like that, it was just really like a thing that sounded like a good idea.
Yeah.
At the time,
I love doing that. That's one of my favorite things to do, just walking out and not really have a goal, just literally taking a path and photographing whatever is interesting to you, how the light hits a certain building or a shadow or, anything like that, somebody's reaction to what they're doing. And, if you're giving in a personal space, you can get so creative. And then if you're close up, you can ask questions, you can have a conversation with the subject before you put your camera up. So there's so many different outcomes of it. So it's kind of like a thrill. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. That's a funny thing, actually, because I love the interactions that you get with other people. Sometimes, when it becomes obvious that you're taking pictures,
Yeah.
And some time ago, I got for this particular purpose, I got a Fuji camera, like an X Series X100.
Yeah.
And it's a very retro looking camera. It's a digital camera, but it's very retro looking. So it looks like a film camera.
Right.
And the amount of people that will comment on that is remarkable, because it catches people's eyes and go like, "Oh, are you photographing film?"
Right.
It's like, wow. But immediately, you've got a conversation going, and it's a good kind of conversation starter.
Yeah. I wanted to get more into film. I think it's really time consuming to even develop your own film.
Oh yeah.
I took a class before and I loved it, but the time to process and develop my own film is just a lot. But I still want to dabble into it. It's exciting to do that.
Yeah, that's something we had actually planned for 2020. 2020 was going to be the year where we sort of dive into film and see what we could do with that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that never happened. So 2021,
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, you still have time.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing I would probably just say is to anyone who wants to do photography and is thinking about it but is scared, just try it out. Just don't be afraid to fail and kind of stick to someone who knows what they're doing, because a mentor really lifted me out of like even just trying to start. I think that helped me a lot. Having someone show me, having someone teach me, somebody who's been experienced really helped me make this happen. And it was fun learning from an experienced photographer, Quentin Jackson. He helped me at the very beginning. I used to watch a lot of YouTube, but it was different learning from a screen when you can't ask questions back immediately. So when you have someone who's going to help you step by step and kind of show you, and you can physically do it yourself, that makes all the difference. So I would advise anyone to have a mentor, keep creating, keep making mistakes, keep your camera with you at all times so that you're always shooting, because the more you shoot, you get better. I think that's like something I would always want to tell someone if they're thinking about getting into photography.
How did you first get how did you find a mentor at first?
So I found a mentor. I had an aunt in Atlanta who noticed I took an interest in photography, and she just connected me with someone in her network. And then that person connected me with him. So it was just like it trickled down to, oh, well, I know this person, so you should, reach out to them and join a group that gets together every month. It's like a meetup, and that's how it all started. Just attending a meetup and listening to everyone's creative advice, and then just having the courage to ask more questions and to call and to hang out and learn more and to go on shoots and do shoots that you don't get paid for at the beginning. I think that's like how it all started.
That's how a lot of people start generally.
Yeah.
It's usually, it's a bit like being a musician. You always get asked to bring your guitar to a party.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I bet.
But the meetup thing, I really like that idea. That's something we should start.
Definitely. And it's kind of like the photo video chat, right? To a certain extent.
Yeah.
So back at the start of lockdown, when we started this podcast, we started a weekly kind of Zoom call where anybody out there could join.
Oh, cool.
And the idea at the time, right, was to just chat photography, chat videography, and just with, our intent with it was to get people being creative again.
Yeah.
People just felt that little slump in that first month of lockdown. And but that's developed into more of a kind of tutorial style chat over the last couple of months, right?
As one of these things, originally it was literally, we would get text messages and whatever, and phone calls. We would talk to people, and and a lot of people would say kind of the same thing. They would say like, "Oh, I haven't, my camera's been in the back for a month, I haven't taken it out, because I can't go and shoot wildlife that I would normally shoot, or like, or events or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I'm just totally disillusioned, and I feel completely uncreative, and I just don't know what to do. And so after listening to a number of people saying the same thing, we kind of thought, what if we just all got together on a Zoom call, of course, because that's what you did. And we'll just talk about it, and we'll just come up with ideas, and maybe, you never know, something might come out of it, And that was really cool. And I think it started to motivate people again, because, there are lots of like really cool ideas that came out of it. Like, we had this thing where we're like, okay, how about we find pockets of light around the house?
Yeah. Follow your dogs, do something like that. I started
exactly.
doing that. Yeah. I started taking photos of my dogs and day in the life of Cola and Diesel, my 2 dogs, and just kind of like doing a series, like challenge yourself and take photos of what's around you in your house, in your backyard. That's definitely what we did here too. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And, like, it just like lots of stuff like that. And then over time, when things started to go back a little bit, when like the whole lockdown was like eased up and things went to something resembling normalcy, but, not really. Then it changed into almost like a Photoshop tutorial thing every Tuesday night.
Wow.
we just pick another subject, like how to cut out hair, or something.
Yeah.
And we'll just do that kind of thing. That was really cool, actually. That was fun too.
It's been great fun.
So but I like the idea of meetup. So I think once we're out of this age of the Zoom, then maybe
the
people
sooner the better.
Yeah. So once we can like meet up in person, and that'd be cool.
Right.
Wait for that. That's awesome.
Great idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was your first camera, by the way?
It was a little Sony camera that my mom and dad got me in high school, and I started using that. And then I had a friend in college who had a Nikon. Don't like Nikons, but he had a Nikon. And I would borrow his Nikon and play around with it. And then I remember, I think it was 2012, I got my first Canon T3i Rebel.
Right.
Yeah. And then I was using that for a long time. I just rented lenses, and probably the last 2 years is when I upgraded to a Canon R. So I had the Rebel for a while, and it did me good. It really did. And there were so many cameras after that came out, and I kept to it because I just kind of realized that it's not the equipment you use, it's what you do with it. You know what I mean? So that kind of was a challenge for myself to just push my limit with something older and utilize what I had for any kind of shoot.
Yeah. It's very often that's really the best thing to do, is just to limit yourself to a 50 mil, like 1.8 or something, like a nifty 50, and just do that for a year,
Right. It's a big challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. It's my youngest daughter. She's 9, and she's really getting into photography. And like I got her last Christmas, like a year ago. She got a little Nikon, like it's like a kid's camera. They're like indestructible. It's kind of like a 16 megapixel sensor on it, though. It's pretty, it's pretty decent. Actually, it takes awesome photos. But it's it's got birds on the front, and like it's all colorful. But it's shockproof and waterproof, and indestructible. For kids, basically. So she started out with that, and now she's got like she's using one of my. I have like an old it's a Nikon D5300 or something, like an old APS-C sensor kind of camera with a 50 mil lens, and she's off.
Right. Nice. Awesome. Sorry about the Nikon comment then. I'm sorry.
Sorry, don't worry about it. Yeah, we
That's awesome.
But you're absolutely right. It's not about the gear in any way, shape, or form. Is actually the biggest reason we rarely talk about gear with guests that we have on, and what cameras to use. It's very rare that actually we get into all of that. Yeah, occasionally we do, because it's just normal and natural, but we rarely ask, because it doesn't matter. It just doesn't. Whatever you've got.
The only thing that does matter is you knowing how to use what you have.
Absolutely.
So that one side of your brain can be creative, and the other side of your brain can say, oh, I need to move this setting so that I can get this, photo. I think that's the hard thing, because that's what took me a while, is learning my camera off bat, where I don't have to think about what I need to do. That way I can capture what I want in the moment. I don't have to stop it. Just learning the camera is so important, whatever camera you have.
Absolutely. Totally agree with that.
That's I use Nikons in the studio usually, and then when I'm out and about, I use a Fuji, and I love the Fuji system. I love it. If I hadn't sunk so much money into glass, into Nikon glass, I would switch in a heartbeat. But that's the limiting factor for me, is the fact that I've got so much invested into it, and it's difficult to switch. But like, there's so many, with the exception of Olympus, maybe. I'm not hating on Olympus users here, by the way. but you could pick just about any camera brand, and actually, I can confidently say that I could achieve anything and everything that I do in photography with just about any camera. Actually, it doesn't really necessarily matter.
Your phone.
Your phone, right?
Yeah, even your phone. I totally agree. I mean, there might be some limitations if you want to get really wide or whatever, or tight, but I agree with what you said. You can really capture anything with any camera you have if you push yourself, and maybe if you have the right small accessories. Sure. But I think low light was my challenge with my Rebel. It was hard to capture things silently and in low light, because the camera just really couldn't do it. I would have to be on a tripod, or I'd have to, be far away, so it would be so loud if it was in an intimate setting. So those things were the only challenges I had with my Rebel when I first started, was trying to be silent and then trying to capture something in an intimate lighting where I don't want to use a flash. You know what I mean? That was the biggest thing for me, why I changed cameras.
It's funny you mentioned low light, because I had exactly the same challenge when I first kind of made that step into professional photography. And that was because I started shooting concerts, in like low light scenarios. And it's low light on one hand, but it's also very fast changing light. And then you have people who move very fast on stage in really crappy lighting conditions. And that's the hardest thing to really capture. And that's when I realized that my APS-C sensor, like consumer Nikon camera, wasn't cutting it anymore. And that's kind of when I went on to a Nikon D750 at the time, which at the time was really the kind of go-to camera for that sort of specific scenario. And then as I found out after that, was that actually it's a pretty decent camera for just about anything you want to do. And that's what kind of sort of bound me into that system at a time. But there's so many great cameras around at the moment. I mean, Canon's latest mirrorless cameras are fantastic. They're phenomenal. The R5 is probably the best mirrorless camera out there. Like Fuji have incredible cameras. The X-T4 is awesome. Their GFX system is, incredible. Sony's cameras are amazing.
I would have gotten a Sony, but because I already had Canon lenses, I didn't want to fully change. The only thing with the Sony, they're so heavy. They're great cameras, but they're heavy for me. So I realized when I was using it, my wrist started to hurt. And I was just like, well, I love Canon. I know, how to use it. The configuration of where buttons were great for me. So I was just like, let me stick to it. But I do love Sony cameras too.
Again, you make a really good point there, because very often it's about the camera that fits you, And I actually find the same thing with, on one hand, with Nikons, I'm really familiar with them because I've used them for a long time and I know where all the buttons are, as like you said, and especially in the menu as well. I know where everything is in the menu.
Right.
And then when I shoot a Fuji, I like the fact that everything's mechanical on it. Like, you've got, rather than having menu, buttons or whatever, everything has a dial or something, like a really old-fashioned kind of camera. But the actual menu is horrendous. I mean, I don't know what they were thinking. Honestly, like, who came up with that? That menu structure is diabolical, So I've shot that Fuji for what, 2 years nearly, a year and a half or something. I still can't get my head around that.
I want to try it. I haven't played around with the Fuji before.
Fuji's are fun. I mean, it's just, I love taking that X100, X100F that I have. It's a camera that I take out, I want to shoot. It's like, I'm like, it just makes it exciting.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm looking into that. It's cool.
It's it's a really fun street photography kind of camera. You know, I just love using it. And that's what it is, like when you hold the tool in your hand and it just gives you that excitement about photography. Then
yeah,
you know.
I just got this little thing Christmas. It's the G7X Mark III.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So I like it because it's small and I could literally wear it on my neck and just shoot and take it everywhere.
Yeah.
So with my art, it's kind of big, and I really want to I'm really, careful about it because I don't want anything to happen to it. Yeah. And then I got this disposable film camera by Manual. I don't know if you guys heard of it.
Oh, I've seen this recently.
Yeah. So I'm going to play around with that too. It has 24 shots in there. So I just like to, like you said, play around with different things, test things out, and just have fun.
Yeah. I was also around Christmas, of course, I was looking at Polaroids and Fuji Instax.
Yeah, I love those.
You know, so I was so close to pulling the trigger on a Polaroid.
You should get it. It'd be fun. You get that instant satisfaction when you see the photo after. Yeah, I mean
that's basically. I think 2021 is going to be this thing. I'm definitely going to do something in the kind of instant film kind of world. I'm not 100%. I haven't made up my mind as to whether I'm going to sort of go with Polaroid or whether I'm going to get a Fuji Instax camera, because there's pros and cons to both systems basically.
Yeah.
And I just have to kind of mull it over a little bit. Cost is a big one. Polaroid, the film's probably twice as expensive as a Fuji film. That's one of the considerations. But I don't know. I mean, it's definitely on the cards for this year. Like I said earlier, my daughter had this little Nikon with the birds and it's got Paris and stuff on the front of it.
When we do get out on the street again, take some photos, that's the camera you're bringing.
I should take that. That's a really great idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Definitely.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
Yeah. I'm not going to shoot anyone. I'm just going to shoot you shooting with that camera.
That's not a bad idea. We should actually make a little short movie out of it. See? This is the great thing about this podcast. I always come up with great ideas.
Yeah. That's good.
Wicked. We're going to credit you for giving us that idea for sure.
There you go. And let me see the final outcome of it too.
Oh, yeah. That's a deal, by the way.
Yeah.
We'll definitely do that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen, it was fantastic having you on the show. And again, we've learned a ton of things.
Yeah.
It was it was great. When I first saw what was happening, and I kind of thought, that'd be really interesting to talk to you. I never in a million years thought that you would agree to come on the show. So it's it's even more amazing that we had this opportunity. We're a small podcast, obviously, and I'm 100% sure that our listeners and our viewers on YouTube will love this episode. So thank you very much for coming on and talking to us.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it. It was fun talking to you guys. Let me know if you want to get together again.
Oh, for sure.
Definitely.
100%. Krys, thank you so much. For all of you listening to the audio version, of course, make sure you head over to YouTube, give us a little subscribe, hit that subscribe button, bell thing, whatever that is. Leave a comment. And before I forget, if you are listening to this show from Perth, Australia, we definitely want to hear from you. I say this in every week. We shout out one of our listeners. The thing is, in the analytics, there's a little world map, and we can see where people are when they listen to us. And it's super exciting for us to see people pop up in different places in the world. So we've just noticed that there's somebody in Perth, Australia, who seems to be listening to the show. So if that is you, please get in touch. You can email us at camerashakepodcast@gmail.com, or just hit us up on Facebook, facebook.com/camerashakepodcast, or we're on Instagram at camerashakepodcast. What a surprise. Or even on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, our Twitter handle is @ShakeCamera. Weirdly. So send us a message in any way, shape, or form. Tie a note to a pigeon, send that over. don't care. But if you're in Perth, get in touch. So that being said, that was episode 37 of the Camera Shake podcast. I hope you enjoyed it with our special guest, Krys Alex, this week. And we'll be back with episode 38 next week.